Hi everyone. Today we are going to discuss data encapsulation and de-encapsulation. So as we know from our previous video that both TCP/IP model, which is shown here, and the OSI model, which is shown there, they are divided into layers, and each layer performs some specific job so that the node on the network can communicate with each other. Nodes means the computers or any electronic gadget. So what happens when a user, for example, when a user requests for some information, it actually hands over that request to the application layer. So, and the application layer adds application layer header. So the application layer adds header on top of that. This is the header added by the application layer, and this header can have information like HTTP or FTTP. And this is not frequent, but sometimes at the application layer adds header and sometimes not. But we are talking when the application layer actually adds header on top of the data. So application layer received the request from the user and added header on top of that. And after that, application layer hands over that data to the transport layer. And the transport layer actually receives this complete information, data plus header like this. And transport layer adds header by itself on top of that. So you see, this is the header from the application layer, and this is the header you can see from the color. So this is the header from the transport layer. And we call this a segment. This is important, that whatever data as well as header has been received at the transport layer, that is being added with the header, and this complete thing is called a segment at the transport layer. So the data and the header is known as segment at the transport layer, and header actually has the control information. So in this case, at the transport layer, header has the port address. Then this process, actually the process of putting header and some at the data link layer, the trailer around some data, is known as encapsulation. So encapsulation, the encapsulation is the process of adding header on top of data. So in this case, this is encapsulation. At the transport layer, this is again an encapsulation because the header is being added around the data. So this is called the encapsulation. And then transport layer hands over this segment to the network layer. Network layer actually receives that complete segment and adds header on top of that. So header around that, and this header, the new header, is by the transport layer. So I hope you can see that black color shows that this is the header added by the network layer. And then network layer, at the network layer, this complete information or this complete data as well as header is known as packet. So for the network layer, actually for the network layer, this the point from this to this point, this is data, and this is the header introduced by the network layer. And then network layer, after doing that thing, network layer hands over that packet to the data link layer. And it's important, at this data, at this network layer, this is called a packet. It means data plus header. When we are talking at the network layer, that is termed as packet. And then network layer hands over that packet to the data link layer. You see, at the data link layer, again, what happens? The data link layer is going to add the trailer and the header on top of that. So you see, this complete packet has been received by the data link layer. You can see here up to this point, this has been received by the network layer, and this data link layer adds trailer and the header around that, and we call this a frame. So same data plus header, when we are talking on the data link layer, then this is called a frame. So these are different names at different layers of this TCP/IP model. And in general, the common name for all of them is PDU, that is Protocol Data Unit. So this is also protocol data unit, this is also protocol data unit, this is also a protocol data unit. So these all are called PDU, but a specific name on transport layer is segment if we are using TCP, but if we are using UDP, then this is called datagram. And the same thing, the data and the packet at the network layer is known as packet, and the data and the header as well as trailer is known as frame when we are at data link layer. We have discussed this in previous video in TCP IP as well as OSI model. And the general name for all of them is PDU, that is Protocol Data Unit. Now, you see, in these all case, the lower layer, so the lower layer provides services to the upper layer. You see, the application layer handed over data to the transport layer. It means transport layer has to provide services to the application layer. And the transport layer handed over the data to the network layer. It means now the network layer has to provide the services to the transport layer. So all the lower layer providing services to the upper layer on the same computer is known as adjacent layer interaction. So these are the adjacent layers. So for example, at this transport layer, the application layer and this network layer are the adjacent layer, and they interact with each other to make communication between nodes possible. So this is called the adjacent layer interaction. And then what happens once all these things have been done up to data link layer, that is that frame is handed over to the physical layer, and at the physical layer the data is converted into zeros and ones, and now these zeros and ones actually travel from this medium to the destination node. So this is the destination node, this is the source node. At the destination physical layer receives those zeros and ones, and it actually at the data link layer this actually makes a frame. So you can see at the data link layer the frame has been received, which was transmitted by this node, by the transmitting node. So this frame is there, and at the data link layer, after receiving that frame, the data link layer will remove this header and trailer from the received frame, and this will hand over this remaining thing to the network layer, and the network layer will receive this complete thing. The network layer will receive the packet, and the network layer, after receiving this packet, will remove this header. So this header will be removed, and then after removing the header which was introduced by the network layer, here at the transmitting end, that header is removed at the destination by this network layer, and now the network layer hands over that to the transport layer. And before that, this process, actually this removal, or the process of removing header as well as trailer in the data link layer, is known as de-encapsulation. So de-encapsulation is the reverse process, that in encapsulation we added the header, and during de-encapsulation we are going to remove the header. So each layer is going to remove the header introduced by the respective layer on the transmitting end. So the network layer hands over that to the transport layer, and the transport layer, when received a segment, the transmit layer will remove the header part which was actually introduced by this transport layer. So this transport layer added the header, and at the destination node, this transport layer is going to remove this header like this. And then the remaining is handed over to the application layer, and then application layer may remove the header introduced at the application layer at the transmitting end. You see, this header was introduced by the application layer at the transmitting end, and at the receiving end, this application layer is going to remove that header, and then this will be processed by the application, and the user can see, or user can get whatever was requested, or the transmission will be completed at this point. So this is what happened here from transmission, or from the transmitting end to the receiving end. And you see here we discussed that whatever action was performed by the application layer at the transmitting end, the reverse process or reverse action was performed by the application layer at the destination end. So it means these same layers on distant computers interact with each other, and we call it as a same layer interaction. So you see, application layer added something and application layer removed something. The same way transport layer added header, and the opposite side on the destination node, the transport layer removed that header. And in that header, actually they have some information for each other. And in this way, these same layers interact with each other, and we call that same layer interactions. So this was the video for today. The important point was that encapsulate means you add header on top of data, and then you remove it. Then we call it de-encapsulation. And when the data as well as header is at the transport layer, we call it a segment or the datagram. When this is at the network layer, we call it a packet. And when that is at the data link layer, we call it frame. And when the layers, adjacent layer on the same computer interact with each other, then we call it the adjacent layer interaction. When same layers on distant computers interact with each other, we call it the same layer interactions. So thank you for today. I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you.